He's the best at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice. But some stories are. Your Geek History lesson on the best Wolverine stories is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Jason, the best podcast at what he does, but what he podcasts isn't very nice. Inman.
What you podcast isn't very nice?
Sometimes it's not. Welcome to your Mind University, because this is Geek History Lesson, everybody, the podcast where we teach you about one character, one team, or one book in pop culture and tell you everything you need to know about them. And today is a very Canadian episode, you could call it. Today is a very northern episode. We are talking about Mr. Wolverine. That is his full name, correct? Mr. Ezekiel Wolverine?
Ezekiel Wolverine.
Yes, but Marvel Comics' very famous character. We are going to give you our opinions on what we think are some of the best Wolverine stories out there. Of course, like as you know, with all of our previous list episodes, if you've listened before, and if you haven't listened before, welcome. Hello, new listener. But if you have listened before, we always talk about our personal favorite story is not the objective best. So, you know, and nobody's opinion is right and nobody's opinion is wrong. That's how opinions work. And we are joined today by a very, very special guest, Ashley, because the reason we decided to talk about best Wolverine stories is because there is a ramshacking, I don't even know it's a word.
Hood-boggling
Marvel Comics event that is all about Wolverine, the X Lives of Wolverine, and...
Or the 10 Lives of Wolverine.
Oh, that's correct.
If we're using Roman numerals.
You know, okay,
I still say X of Swords, so like, whatever.
I have heard it said on interviews, it is, and I've heard our special guest actually say it is 10 Lives of Wolverine.
Yeah, he's going to smack us around.
And 10 Deaths of Wolverine.
Yeah.
Just like House of X, Powers of X, that Jonathan Hickman X-Men event. Hoxbox. I kind of like X Lives.
So do I.
And X Deaths.
But, so let me say his name, because current Wolverine scribe Ben Percy.
And X-Force scribe.
And former GHL guest
yes!
Ben Percy, who's written Wolverine in many mediums, which we'll talk about more with him. But he is joining us for the discussion portion. We're super excited. Ben is a very, very talented writer, very, very sweet man. So please stick around and listen. But Jason, before we get to some TAs for this episode,
wait, we should talk about the TAs first.
Okay. Our TAs are Adam Ely and Glenn Shipley. Thank you so much for requesting our best Wolverine
I can't believe
stories.
they suggested that. That's awesome.
These are like old school suggestions. Adam Ely. I don't know if it's actually pronounced Ely. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. This is like, he is a dyed in the wool OG. This is like a Tumblr era request, GHL. But I want to ask you before we move on, Jason. Do you know? You said Mr. Wolverine is his real name. What's Wolverine's full name? What's his Christian name?
James Howlett.
James
I don't know.
Logan.
Oh, that's right.
Howlett.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. And we have one more thing we want to tell you all about today, right, Jason?
Yes, that's right. Everybody out there, as you know, you've been a longtime listener or a brand new listener to this podcast. You know that I am just a Kansas farm boy who loves comic books, loves Superman, and basically loves everything that has to do with the Silver Age of comics. And for a while now, I've been wanting to inject some more of that love into comic books. And that is something that has led me to Kickstarter. And that is why I am proud to announce that Super Best Friend Issue 2, the second issue of my superhero series, is coming to Kickstarter February 1st. You can go to superbestfriendcomic.com. That link will be in the description. And if the campaign is live, you can get all kinds of tiers as all kinds of cool things. There's a lot of love of Electric Superman in there. There's a lot of love of Cyborg Superman in there. Basically, all my love of Superman is in Super Best Friend. We had a very successful first issue, and now we got a second issue coming. But I need everybody that is listening that can hear this podcast to come on over to Kickstarter at superbestfriendcomic.com. There's a lot of really cool early bird specials, and there's a variant cover by a DC Comics superstar. So basically, if you haven't heard about this comic book, the elevator pitch is, what if the world's greatest superhero had a best friend who accidentally live streamed his secret identity to the entire world? And what does that lead to? And what zany exploits does that, basically get up to or what happened. You know, basically, you understand. You understand it, right, Ashley? You get this?
I mean, I've read the issue and
You've
I
read all
know
of
how
it.
spectacular it is. That's true. I've read ahead as well. I also want to say, if people want to ferret out who the DC Superstar guest artist is, I would look at the GHL archives and make an educated guess.
I would say that is a very strong guess. But yes, we have a DC Comics superstar who did a variant cover for Super Best Friends. So come over there, help me. It's a 48-page comic that you can only get on Kickstarter. You can only get this variant cover on Kickstarter as well. So come over and check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a lot of live streams. SuperBestFriendComic.com. Thanks, everybody.
By the way, that's 2.4 times more pages than your average
That's right.
comic book.
That's right.
So there we go.
All right, cool.
I want to say before we dive into our list that if you are a newer listener and you're screaming, but I thought this was a Wolverine episode, well, my friend, we have 2 times as many Wolverine episodes already. Episode 150 and 151 of Geek History Lesson Hour are our
a two-parter.
history lessons on Wolverine. And I also want to start with, in the proud tradition of GHL, a caveat. Since our guest, Ben Percy, is writing the current and not yet finished Wolverine, we're not going to be including his books because the run hasn't ended yet. We're not trying to spoil anything for anybody who's not super caught up on contemporary comics. And because I hope that you know that if we invited him to be a guest on the podcast, we think his work is pretty awesome. So his books will be in the recommended reading, but they're not going to be on any of our lists.
His run is excellent. One, because he brings back my favorite 90s X-Men character, Maverick. But also, yeah, Ashley's correct. It would be too soon, although I'm very certain that his run will be added to this list. It's a little, it's you know, Mr. Percy, we know Ben. We know Ben.
Benjamin.
We've broken bread. We've drank beers together. You'll get there in due time.
If it's your best Wolverine podcast, man, you'd be number 1.
There you go. All right, Ashley, let's get into this list starting at number 5, working our way all the way up to number 1. Ashley, what do you think is the 5th best Wolverine story?
So I want to say that the title of this episode and the parameters of this episode are best Wolverine stories.
Yes.
Not best James Logan Howlett Wolverine stories.
Okay.
So my number 5 best Wolverine is All New Wolverine from 2015 by Tom Taylor and art by David Lopez.
Oh, I knew you were going to sneak one of these in here.
This is Laura Kinney, like 15 years after her inception, finally embracing her destiny, being Wolverine, looking hotter in the costume than Logan ever hoped to look in the costume. She replaces him as local hero because at this time in the 616, he was Old Man Logan, which was like,
well, technically he was dead.
Well, yeah, but Old Man Logan was it was weird.
Old Man Logan from the alternate. So it was not a good decision.
Laura's Wolverine. It's a really, really cool reexamination and reimagination of this character. The creative team they take really special care to carve out a unique identity for Laura, probably because the movie Logan was right around the corner, released in 2017, so it would have been filming at this time, so they probably had some insight on that. Instead of just making her a carbon copy of Logan, which is something that happens, and in the great tradition of Wolverine, she strikes out on her own, she adopts young girls who need a mentor, and she kicks a bunch of butt the whole book long. Also, everyone who she mentors are also Wolverine clones. So a sisterhood gets to develop over the course of the series amidst dialogue that's like genuinely funny and all of the violence. And I have really come to respect this as a good Wolverine story that deserves to stand in the canon of Wolverine stories. And just by the fact that once they sort of took the role of Wolverine away from Laura, she became a little bit less interesting, I think proves how great she is in the mantle. And then also, if we can have an early action figure spotlight. Action figure spotlight.
Thank you.
I have the Laura Wolverine action figure because I couldn't believe they made it. She looks so cool in this. And
we should explain, she's in the classic yellow and blue.
The yellow and blue. And I think, like Batman, and Jason has made this point for Dick Grayson before, I think Wolverine as a mentor is his greatest legacy, and what fulfills that more than all new Wolverine? And ultimately, it's Wolverine unlike you've ever seen it before. So it's my number 5.
Cool.
And I know that you like that series as well, but I knew that you wouldn't put it on your list.
That is correct.
All right, so follow the rules properly and tell me what's your number 5 best Wolverine story.
So my number 5 comes from the height of the New Avengers era when Wolverine was on the Avengers and Spider-Man was on the Avengers. And then there was this weird thread in Marvel where they decided that Spider-Man and Wolverine were best friends, which sometimes didn't work and sometimes really worked well. And this is one of the stories where it really worked well. I am talking about the Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine limited series by Jason Aaron and Adam Cubert, who I am going to put out right now. I think Adam Cubert is the best artist to ever draw Wolverine.
Okay. Hashtag GHL Wolverine art. Yes?
I don't know what that means.
We can do a top 5 Wolverine artists?
I mean,
or top 5 XMen artists?
As I've said this many times in the podcast, I think it's hard to talk about
famously
art
visual media
on an audio podcast, but sure. But also, Adam Cubert also drew action figure spotlight, Weapon X, The Age of Apocalypse, and that is the only Wolverine action figure that I own. Is the recent Marvel Legends Wolverine. It's so cool because everybody on this listen to this podcast know. You
will have seen that in Jason's Instagram feed about around the time we were recording this episode.
That's right. Actually, no, at the exact day that this episode will come out.
Hey, there you go.
It's called Pre-Programming Your Instagram, Ashley.
What?
So basically in this, they're Avengers at this time, and they are stuck in a weird, wild, time-traveling adventure. There are dinosaurs in this. There are cowboys in this. There are robots in this. There are moon-sized villains in this. It's basically, I get the impression that this was Jason Aaron saying, I'm going to take Spider-Man and Wolverine literally into every corner of the Marvel Universe and have fun. And by all rights, this is a very bombastic story. It should not work, but it's the small character moments. This is, to me, the only story that explains why these two men would be friends. Because
vehemently.
Thank you. I don't think they would be. Because I think Peter Parker would not like Wolverine's killing and draw a hard line. So it's a little weird that Peter Parker, the person that's all about great responsibility, would just be friends with kind of a murderer. I mean, look, I like Wolverine, but he's more anti-hero than hero. And I know this is selling, crazy here, but let me just give you the opening scene, okay? The opening scene is 65 million years ago. A bearded Peter Parker looks at the sky through a handmade telescope. And then he eventually goes to a valley. And he meets up with Logan, who also has a long beard and everything like that, who's now a leader of a bunch of cavemen. And Peter's like, hey, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, it's a coming. See you later. That's the opening scene. And then you're like, well, how did they get here? It also has a cliffhanger that I don't think has ever been addressed in Marvel continuity. As far as I know, please tell me if I'm wrong, listeners, at GHL Podcast on Twitter. But I don't think this cliffhanger, which specifically deals with James Howlett's origin, has ever been picked up again. And if it has, I missed it. But anyways, I like this story because it should not work. And I think it really, really does. And that is my number 5.
Can I have a phone ring, please?
You gotta, hold on a second.
Okay, you need to pick it up.
Hello?
This choice of yours offends me. I am Logan's best friend, not Peter Parker.
Who is this?
This is Kurt Wagner's Incredible Nightcrawler, and you know this.
Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
Kurt Wagner?
No, that is Russian. I am German.
How are the international costs on this call? Pretty expensive, huh?
This is 2022. I am calling you through FaceTime on the internet. It is free.
What are you calling about again?
How dare you pick that Spider-Man is Wolverine's best friend and not me?
Look, Kurt,
Wolverine is my best friend.
There is no, I couldn't find.
I was at his wedding.
You probably were.
I was. I just read that story.
Oh, you read your own story.
I did. I call my remembering things, reading my stories.
What did you give him as a wedding gift, Kurt?
Oh, I just gave him my presents and my blue fur.
Your presents, not presents.
My presents is all present.
Does he pet your belly? Is that what happens?
Not my belly. That's gross.
But he pets other places.
He scratches behind my ears.
Well, Kurt, there's no series called Astonishing, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine. So
you should fix that.
I should fix that?
Yeah.
Okay. You should probably talk to the Wolverine writer we have on the podcast later, Kurt.
I don't think that will happen.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you later. Give kisses to Tex.
Tex is not here.
Give kisses to Tex.
Okay.
All right. Bye, Kurt.
Auf Wiedersehen.
All right, there we go. All right, Ashley, what's your number 4?
My number 4. It's so funny.
And I apologize. Like when
it's okay.
The sound effects are not immediate. So when you
no, they're not. And only Jason. I think it's very evident that only Jason has control of them, which is why Jason's the only one who ever calls anyone. Or Tex. I'm so sorry for misnaming Tex. Yeah. It's fitting that you bring up origin stories for Wolverine.
Oh no.
What? Oh no! What? Oh no!
We'll get into it if it shows up.
Because he has about 185 of them.
Okay. Okay.
Like all X-Men. So it was really important to me. In the tradition of Stan Lee, every comic might be someone's first comic. And I've noticed that this does happen on our best lists to include what I think is the best and cleanest Wolverine origin story. And so I include Wolverine, origin, 2013, written by Paul Jenkins with art by Andy Cubert. Why? Oh, no.
I'll let you finish.
No, I want to know.
I'll let you finish. No, please tell. Please. So I will just put this out right now, Ashley, but I want to hear you finish because I want to hear what is on the list.
Okay.
I detest this story.
I can tell. I didn't know this. Why?
I want to hear why you put it on the list, and then I will tell you my
Okay,
faults.
I think because
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I think for my money, this is the best, cleanest, clearest Wolverine origin we've ever had, and the art looks great. Like the
art is the best reason for that story.
Logan's history up to this point is purposefully vague, minus Weapon X.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all kind of muddied in film and television and in comic books. And I admire Marvel or someone at Marvel coming down and committing to this updated version of Wolverine's origin, which came out as part of Marvel Now. And this has pretty much been the story that they've stuck to for this entire point. Paul Jenkins is
a great writer, by the way.
He's a fantastic writer. He includes all of the greatest hits that you think of for Wolverine's origin, 19th century Canadian origins, Bone Claw, The Journey to Metal Claws, The Amnesia, and really perfects it, I think, for a contemporary reader set against a nostalgic sepia-toned backdrop. I just think this is the best version of the origin story. So I'm truly I'm not saying your opinion is wrong, but I'm truly taken away that you don't like the story.
I don't like it because they made a big deal about it when it came out.
Yes, of course they did.
And to be honest with you, it's not really a Wolverine story. It's a story about this kid named James. And it doesn't even it doesn't even get to Weapon X, Ashley. It gets to he goes to a mine in Canada. He's being chased by Sabretooth or somebody that we think is Sabretooth. Who's secretly kind of his real father. It's never quite, or no, it's really his dad because Sabretooth. Here's the reason why I don't like it, because also it didn't clear up his origin. It made it even muddier, and then it just ends with he doesn't even get the claws. He doesn't even get anything. You don't get explained about his dad or anything like that. It's just he decides to call himself Logan based on the man who was his fake father. And then he walks away.
Well, I didn't say he got his claws. I said it sent him on his way to his claws. Because I think if you read...
To his metal... Well, he always has a claws, but his metal claws.
His metal claws. I think if you read this and then you read the original Weapon X storyline...
And I think they made a sequel to this too, I believe.
They did. It's not as good.
No, it's not.
I think that... I don't know. I really like this.
My thing is that... And in the research for this podcast, I saw it on a lot of lists.
Yeah.
I think I saw it on every list.
Do you think the art is what carries this?
Yes. The art is...
Another Cubert, by the way.
Also, the covers, fantastic. I also think it is Cubert. Is this Andy?
It is Andy.
It's because Adam's the older brother and Andy's the younger brother. Andy's the one who does the amazing Batman run with Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
Anyways, Adam is the Wolverine guy. Anyways, I think they do something with his art where they don't ink it or they paint it or they color. And so it makes it look even better. But I just think this is... When you talk about unnecessary stories, this is an unnecessary story. To me, the coolest thing of Wolverine was that we didn't know his past. And then when you take that away, he's less interesting. I like the idea that all I needed from him was to learn his name, and then to learn, all I ever wanted was, okay, when approximately were you born? If you tell me 1850s, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know that he had he lived in a mansion and he went to a mine in Canada.
And he had a stepbrother who wasn't claimed.
Called Dog.
I guess I like this because to me, it feels like a fever dream of who James could have been if he hadn't become Wolverine.
And
but I don't disagree with you, though. Do we need a Wolverine origin? Absolutely not. But we were never not going to get one.
Well, the problem is I think with modern, this happened in the mid 2000s.
This was 2013. So.
Oh, okay. Well, once we got that far, like it was going to happen. I just think it's unnecessary, and I also want to apologize. I didn't mean to come against you, but like,
no, that's okay. You just we've never up to this point. We're almost at 400 episodes. We've never in the list looked at each other and been like, I hard disagree with this choice. We're usually like, I didn't put it on my list, but I like. So this was just like a new experience.
This is probably again, and I think this is probably my. If you were to ask me what I think is the least best. Or that's not even good grammatically. My grammar is terrible today.
The worst would be the opposite of the best.
Holy cow.
It's early, folks.
Superbestfriendcomic.com, everybody. Because I bungled that advertisement.
Jason is a professional writer in multiple mediums.
Good God. If you were to ask me what I think is the worst Wolverine story of all time, I would put this without even hesitation.
Wow. Yep. Wow. And this, I want to say also for listeners, this is the fun thing about having dueling opinions, and this is how you can disagree respectfully because I'm still going to keep it on my list.
Oh, I'm not trying to convince you to take it off.
No, I know, and I'm not offended by the fact that you were like, not this one, though.
Yeah. But I think Ashley also brought it up because the minute she mentioned it, she could see my face, and I was like, oh, please don't tell me you're putting Origin on there.
I like Origin, man. I think it's a good time.
I'm glad you went more for you.
Honestly, great then. Yeah, more for me. In the pantheon of unnecessary Wolverine stories that Ashley likes, I put this right next to the death of Wolverine, which is unnecessary, but I also liked it. All right, Jason, what's your number 4? Will this disappoint me?
No, my number 4 is one that needs a guitar riff. It's like, it is Enemy of the State by Mark Miller with pencil by John Romita Jr. in 2008. Basically, this is the story that a lot of people called Wolverine versus the Marvel Universe. It has basically the opening story is Logan dies. Mm-hmm. He gets revived by the Daredevil ninja cult, the Hand, and they send him out to kill literally everybody in the Marvel Universe. He fights Daredevil. He fights Elektra. He breaks into the Baxter Building. Mm-hmm. Now, it is crazy to me that in 2008, up to this point, nobody else had pitched. What if Wolverine broke into the Baxter Building? That shocks me. But it's so cool. It kind of falls apart towards the end when it gets more into the occult hand stuff. But like for the first 6 issues, to me, it is a relentless action story at a breakneck pace. Every issue is Wolverine versus this person, Wolverine versus the X-Men, Wolverine versus Elektra, Wolverine versus Daredevil. And it's just popcorn movie drawn by one of the best artists that have ever drawn comic books ever. He draws a hell of a Wolverine. And I just think sometimes it's nice to be reminded that Wolverine is a killer. Because the arc of Wolverine is that he's from killer to hero, right?
I'm the best at what I do, and what I do isn't very nice.
Yes, exactly. And he's never been able to escape that. So every once in a while, it is nice to get a story where you're like, oh, this is how truly dangerous Wolverine is. That he could literally fight the entire Marvel Universe and hold his own. Like, he trounces the Fantastic Four. He trounces Daredevil very easily. And he basically takes on the X-Men. It's him versus 25 X-Men, and he almost beats the entire team. I think the only one he can't stop is Cyclops. Or it's like it comes down to him and Cyclops at the very end.
Well, now we know all they have to do is make out and it'd be no problem.
Well, now we know that off panel that happened somewhere. And that's what cured the brainwashing.
Marvel, you should put it on panel. Is the only thing. Can I add to this?
Please.
This is my number 1.
Whoa, okay.
This is my number 1.
Come on in there. I'm going to open the door wide.
I just think this is like the best version of a Wolverine story. I'm going to bring up a story a little bit later that I think lays out what some of the key elements are in a Wolverine story. I talked about it when I was talking about like Laura Kinney's story. And this gives you amnesia, a redemption arc, and a lot of violence.
Okay.
Which is all you really need for Wolverine. And then, like, sometimes a girlfriend who dies. And then Mark Millar is great at exploring characters. He's great at dressing that up in creative fights, and he's great at snappy dialogue. Like, for years and years, I've been like, this is the like when we couldn't make a Wolverine movie, I was like, it's Enemy of the State. Make Enemy of the State. What is so hard about it? Make Enemy of the State. Like, for Superman, we were like,
we said that for a long time.
We said make Superman Birthright. What is so hard? Make Superman Birth. Like, there are some, and it's Disney will never do it now because Fox couldn't do it, so Disney certainly won't.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna tell you. I think with the MCU as built out as it is, this would be a very interesting way to introduce Wolverine.
You think they're going to go hard? This would have to be hard R.
I don't. No. You could do this PG-13. If you read this story again, Ashley, it's a PG-13 story. It is not a hard R.
But there's blood in it.
But he doesn't actually stab any of the Marvel heroes. Not once.
No, that's true. But I mean, if you're going to have him do like... Oh, well, that's true.
It doesn't happen till the end when he starts fighting all the hand ninjas.
Well, I was going to say he slaughters the hand.
I mean, look, in any Wolverine story, you have to accept, especially in comic books, that he's not going to stab anybody because, yeah, they're not going to have that much blood in comic books.
Or guts, yeah.
Which is weird, right? Because claws are his main weapon.
Yeah.
Sharp swords on his hand are his main weapon. And he never stabs anybody. I think you could do this in the MCU. And actually, to be honest with you, this would be a very interesting way, if you didn't know who Wolverine was before this, if that's assassin base, but they're not going to make, they wouldn't call this Wolverine Enemy of the State. They would call this something else Enemy of the State.
Yeah, like, XMen Enemy of the State or whatever.
It would be something like that. I actually think this would be a very interesting way to introduce him in the MCU.
I just think this book is like, I think it's super fun and like
the art's astounding.
Wolverine at the end of the day is an action hero. He's like James Bond, right? So part of what you want is to see him beat the holy living snot out of someone. And that's what I come to a standalone Wolverine comic. I go to XMen comics to see Wolverine get explored as a human being, like in something like House of X and Powers of X. I think like is a huge step forward and does such a great service to both him and Scott. But yeah, so like when I worked in a comic book store and people came in and said, I love Wolverine or I loved Wolverine in the movies, this was the book that I handed them. So just based on that, it had to be like my number one because it's the easiest, most accessible, and arguably coolest Wolverine story.
Yeah, and there's not much to really say about it because
the plot's pretty straightforward.
It's just him fighting the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, and it was so successful that Marvel then put out a book called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
I thought didn't they do like Enemy of the State 2?
Yeah, there is an Enemy of the State 2, yeah. There's also a What If Enemy of the State.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. No, this is like Old Man Logan, which is not on my list, but also by Mark Millar. They just kept milking this for all it was worth because Mark Millar, shocking, the guy who created Kingsman, understands cool fights and hyperviolence
and the Ultimates
around a character. Yeah. So.
It's interesting. I've heard it described by several people. And I like Mark Millar.
Yeah.
Some people say that he's an acquired taste for a lot of people because he's big and bombastic, and I've heard a lot of people describe him as the Michael Bay of comic books, which I think is underselling him. But
I agree.
I've heard it described that a lot of people think his two best mainstream stories are the two Wolverine stories. That's like they're the best thing he's ever done in the Marvel Universe. In terms of licensed comics, I definitely think there's an argument. I think that's a very valid argument. Yeah, for sure. I think it depends on how you feel about the Ultimates. Anyway, what are we on? Number 3? Number 3. My number 3, speaking of Mark Millar, is from Ultimate X-Men number 41. It's New Mutants Part 2. It's from 2004. It's written by Brian Michael Bendis and drawn by David Finch. It is a one-shot. Mark Millar had just left the X-Men, and then they gave the title to Brian Michael Bendis, who was writing Ultimate Spider-Man at the time. And this story kind of comes out of left field. It's a one-shot story. And basically, it's a story that focuses only on Wolverine. Now, here's the interesting thing about this story. Wolverine is only in about maybe 6 to 7 pages of this issue.
Interesting.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story.
Okay.
And I'm basically just going to spoil the whole thing for you because it came out 20 years ago, basically. The story starts where a kid wakes up in his house. His mom and dad aren't there. He finds clothes on the floor. They're clothes, but they're not there. So he walks to school and he's talking to his kids at class. And then suddenly the kids at class start screaming and then they disintegrate. So the kid freaks out. He doesn't know what's going on. He walks into a cave and he sits there for like a day. And then here comes Wolverine walking into the cave with a 6-pack and hands him a beer. And he starts talking to the kid. And you find out that this kid is a brand new mutant. And his power is that he basically disintegrates organic matter. So he killed everybody in his hometown, and he's freaking out. And he's literally 14.
But he can't kill Wolverine.
And he can't kill Wolverine. So like Wolverine's like drinking the beer. And so Wolverine and this kid sort of have a discussion about life. And the kid is like, I haven't even kissed the girl and I haven't had sex. And
yeah, this is like Rogue to the nth degree.
Yes. And Wolverine's like, yeah, that's going to happen. And the kid's like, what's going to happen? And Wolverine hands him another beer and says, drink the beer. And just goes, well, nobody's ever going to find out that you killed that kid or that town, because he's like, if you do, that means it's over for all mutants. Like they will kill all of us. And the kid just goes, so I'm not getting out of this cave, am I? And Wolverine goes, drink your beer. And then the end of the story is it's morning and we only see Wolverine walk out of that cave. And that's the story. And you find out that Nick Fury sent him there to basically take care of this kid. I like Wolverine stories where he's a loner. I like Wolverine stories where he has to make the choice that nobody else can. That's Wolverine to me. That's Logan to me. That he realizes that, like, yes, I have to make the tough choice. I have to roll the hard 6. I have to kill this kid. And I just think, to be honest with you, this piece, whatever you think about Brian Michael Bendis, and he is a great writer as well, but he fits, I think, better with characters like Peter Parker. That's why his Ultimate Spider-Man run is so amazing. You know, he doesn't really fit with characters like the X-Men, but it's so interesting to me that in like one issue, and I think because he like sectioned Logan off by himself, he really nailed Logan. Like to a degree. And I think, again, the idea of drink a beer is like the best. Like that's what Wolverine decided, like this is what this kid is going to get on his final night. You're going to get a 6-pack of beer and you're going to drink all 6 cans. Like you're going to get, I'm going to make you heroically drunk.
You're going to get alcohol poisoning.
And then I'm going to take care of you. And I'm going to give, but also if you think about the story in sort of a macro level, right? It's also part of what is the common theme, Ashley, that most Wolverine stories has? He has a young
protege or person who needs care.
And this is sort of that story in a singular issue. You know, and it's, again, like we talk about Batman, it's very interesting that they give the hardened, I think it's because it's a story of opposites. You know, like you have the hardened character and you have the young character. But that's what this is. And it's, I think it's a fantastic issue. And it might be, even though Mark Miller wrote some fantastic issues of Ultimate X-Men number 41 might be the best issue of the entire series. It almost, in my opinion, well, there's a couple Ultimate Spider-Mans that might come into this, but this might be the best single issue of the entire Ultimate Universe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. That
is my number 3.
Okay.
Ashley, what is your number 2?
Well, can I do my number 3 first?
Oh, sorry. Did I skip you?
Yes.
My bad. We already did your number 1. That's why I forgot.
Yeah. My number 3 is the OG Wolverine story, Incredible Hulk number 181 from 1962, written by Icon Len Wein and art by Herb Trimpe. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk about this is because Wolverine is one of the few comic book characters who comes out fully formed. So I think because of his legacy with the X-Men and the way he's been utilized in a post-Bendis era on the Avengers, we forget that he's a villain for the Incredible Hulk. You know literally nothing about him.
Fought Wendigo.
He just kind of shows up to like be a bad guy. So he is designed to wield enough power in order to be a credible threat to the Hulk. And in this issue, like Jason mentioned, 2 future Avengers teammates fight the Wendigo. The art is beautiful. It's totally awesome. Herb Trimpe nails the design. Like his design for Wolverine here basically goes on to be the yellow and blue suit when your proportions on it kind of change depending on who's drawing it. It's the same number of claws. His speech pattern is imprinted by Len Wein. And it's funny because you've recommended like soft Logan stories and I've recommended Logan slaughters people stories.
I guess that shows us. Well, I guess, yeah, because the first issue of Origin, James literally kills his dad or something like that.
Yeah. So I guess that's how we both look at this character. But that is who he is from Jump, and you're gonna hear the year 1962 and you're gonna be like, oh, like Silver Age, it's really weird, and it is, but Len Wein stories are highly readable, and because this is basically a brawl, I mean, check out 180 if you want to see the little Shadow cameo appearance, I guess. Because there's the big debate about which issue is worth more. Like cameo appearances don't count in my opinion. Mary Jane appearing behind the lamp doesn't count. I kind of agree with that, but at the same time, I for a long time owned the cameo appearance of Apocalypse, and I was mad that wasn't the first appearance of Apocalypse. Yeah. Technically. But I think you'd find this infinitely readable. And if you're interested in why Wolverine is the way he is, when you go and revisit this first story, you really understand it. And then it makes all the other stories that we've talked about better through this lens. So interesting. One Big Brawl, Incredible Hulk, 181. Also, if you don't know who the Wendigo is, this is just like a really fun version of that character if you're not going to read Alpha Flight. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so now we're on number one? No, mine number two. You're number two. Yes, and we don't know your number two either. That's right. Yes. So, is this a good point to mention the what we got going on over the Patreon, Ashley? We can. I was going to mention it when we had Mr. Ben Percy, but we can do it right now. So we have a Patreon. Yeah. Patreon.com/Jawiin, where we do a bunch of really fun extra content because if you can't tell, Jason and I love talking about comic books. We love the discussion. We love talking about it with you. And we also love Ben Percy. And he agreed to stick around. Whoa, that's a little forward. I love you, Ben Percy. You're amazing. He's gonna stick around. We're gonna do more chats with him about his career, about comics, about his advice on being a creative and a working creative in this space. We're basically gonna ask him how he writes Wolverine, and if you are interested in that process or you read some of those books, I tell you, these are my favorite conversations because we're gonna talk about his career on Green Arrow and everything like that. We're gonna get inside his brain because that's where the real juice is, the real like creativity is inside. We're gonna crack him open like a nut and be like, "How did you come up with Green Arrow? Good stuff." And he's gonna answer in his deep, sexy voice. He does have a very deep voice. Anyways, so go check that out. Patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin, and throw some support to the podcast. We do 4 extra podcasts a month, and you're gonna want to check them all out. And we thank our super friends that help support us over there. There you go. Okay, Jason, what's your number? Was Wendigo your number 3 or your number 2? 3. That was your number 3? I think we're off here, Ashley. Because I've already done my number 3. Then what's your number 2? Yes. Because it's because you switched the order after I jumped in with my number 1, and we've never recovered from it. Oh, is that what happened? Yeah, it's okay. Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine was my number 5. Enemy to State was my number 4. Ultimate X-Men was my number 3. So we're up to your number 2. So now my number 2. And we have not done your number 2. No. Wow, we're good professional podcasters. Crushing it. Wow. The podcast has been going for 8 years now? Holy cow. My number 2 is a story that I think is probably going to be on everybody's list. Well, it's not on yours, actually. Like you already said so. It's Old Man Logan. It's not on my list. Mark Millar and Steve Niffen. It's 8 issues that also, fun fact, tie into Mark Millar's Fantastic Four run and Mark Millar's 1985 series in kind of an interesting way. Basically, it's set in an alternate future where supervillains have finally won the day, and Wolverine finds himself tricked into killing his X-Men friends by Mysterio. And he is approached by a blind Hawkeye with a Spider-Mobile to basically say, "Hey, I need to go pick up something. Please come as my protection." And eventually it leads into a revenge quest where Wolverine fights the Red Skull dressed as Captain America. This is another one like Enemy of the State where Mark Millar is kind of dipping his toes into all the stuff. Like there is a T-Rex, there's a Venom, there is a T-Rex sized Venom. There's a girl named Ashley. Is that the Spider Girl? Yeah. There's a new Spider Girl in there. You see the Kingpin in this. You see all these other things. But
you have to throw this out there because Marvel took this Old Man blank and then ran it into the ground because there's Old Man Quill now, and then I think there's Old Man Deadpool, and there's Old Man Iron Man. There's a whole bunch of them now. But to me, this is the only one that works. And also, you have to realize that, one, not only is this based on Clint Eastwood's seminal Western movie, Unforgiven. This is so Unforgiven it hurts.
So Unforgiven it hurts.
Yes.
The Wolverine story.
That'd be the Wolverine biography. But this is great. Like I think this story gets looked down on now, but I think it gets looked down on because of all the copies and pretenders. But when this came out, this grabbed everybody. And here's the other interesting thing about this. This was not a mini series. This was in the pages of Wolverine, in the regular Wolverine title, which I remember at the time Mark Millar said that he specifically wanted to do. He did not want it to be a miniseries, which Enemy of the State was in the credit. But also you have to give this for simply because the Logan movie, that Hugh Jackman and 20th Century Fox were so inspired by this story that they were like, this is. And remember, for the years from this story came out, in I don't know the year it came out. I would say
I'll look it up.
Like 2008 would be my guess. 2009. And Logan didn't come out until like 2014, 2015, 2016 in there. For years, people were saying, make this as a movie.
2008.
I was like, yeah, there you go. So you have to realize the staying power of how much this story like grabbed people. Even though it is basically an Elseworld story. And yes, it does have some goofier elements.
It's gross.
It is.
There are some really gross things in this book.
Well, I think you can tell, like, this is Mark Millar's Wanted period, which if you've ever read his series Wanted, that is, I would say, like one of his grossest stories. And this is around that exact same time. I think if Mark Millar were to write this now, it would be a completely different story because he is writing a book right now called King of Spies that is sort of a version of this, but with James Bond or a James Bond archetype. And it is very, it's just bloody. It's not gross. But it's also interesting too, because again, the end of the story, without giving any spoilers away, because I do think you should read it, is it's basically Lone Wolf and Cub. It becomes Lone Wolf and Cub. And then Old Man Logan shows up in Fantastic Four. I'm not kidding. He's actually in that book. So, yeah, I don't know. To me, I couldn't make it number one, but I thought we would be so remiss if we did not talk about this story.
I think that's fair.
So
I didn't put it on my list.
That's totally fine. Ashley, what is your number two, I guess?
My number two is a book that I think probably is in the objective list, the best Wolverine story. But I just think because of its age, it's a little bit less accessible than Enemy of the State. And that's just the difference in the time period when it was written. It is Wolverine from 1982. It is the Chris Claremont and Frank Miller series. You may know this as Wolverine in Japan, which is the first 5 issues of their run.
It's the first Wolverine series of all time.
Yeah. So longtime Geek History Lesson listeners know that I tend to sing Chris Claremont praises and read Frank Miller books and go, that was a book that I understand why it was important, but I did not like it. And when I revisited this, because I read this a long, long time ago, the opening page, the very first page is like an ECU of Logan's face. And I was like, that's the best thing Frank Miller's ever drawn. I understand it. Like for me, I know he's more known for some of his things that he's penned as well, but like, Frank Miller was born to draw Wolverine. He draws the hell out of Wolverine.
Frank Miller's a good artist.
Frank Miller is an artist whose style is not to my taste generally. So I was really taken away that it worked for me here. I don't think he's untalented, but like just what he does doesn't jam with what my brain wants, except here. I thought revisiting it, I was like, wow, this is great. This is a legendary series in the X-Men canon. It introduces Logan's time in Japan into continuity, and it marries Eastern and Western traditions around heroism and martial arts and life and death against like a back spray of sakura blossoms. And these elements have never left Wolverine's canon. We made a one of the X-Men Origins or one of the X-Men Wolverine movies basically tells a worse version of watered down version of this story. The one that I wanted to leave and you wouldn't let me leave.
The
Wolverine.
Yep.
We might have reviewed it on this podcast. I don't remember.
I don't think so.
But structurally, the series is a samurai story. So if you're familiar with like samurai or Ronin tropes like myself, when you read this collection, you'll be like, hey, I know what's happening. How cool. Oh, now he's going to have a new girlfriend and now the redemption. Okay, great. But if you are not as familiar with it, it will be unlike any Wolverine story you've ever read before. I can understand how in 1982, this blew people's heads open and how impactful this was for Wolverine.
I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's one of the very first Marvel limited series or miniseries. Now, I know those are common now, but I think at the time it was one of the first ones ever, if not the first one.
I don't know if it's the first one. It's certainly one of the first ones. And Claremont is usually, if you do go all the way back and listen to our X-Men Days of Future Past episode, that's also written by Chris Claremont. And we read Days of Future Past. And sometimes Claremont in X-Men is super, super wordy. But in Wolverine, I think because he's writing in Wolverine's voice as the narrator, there's not a ton of words on the page. And so you can read these collections, even though this is like hella Bronze Age, really quickly. They read like modern comics. It's really only the coloring that gives us away as being from this time period.
I will tell you as well, just to let you know, everybody, that you said it was 82?
82.
The regular ongoing Wolverine book, the one that followed this, because I know that
has never been out of print.
No, well, they've canceled and brought it back. But yes, didn't start till 1988.
There you go.
So it took them that long.
Yeah.
Even though I know, and I remember saying that or reading that Wolverine miniseries you just talked about was sold like crazy.
Yeah, there's a reason that it's never gone out of print.
It's never gone out of print.
You can still they make really beautiful collections of this. I have a great one to go in our recommended reading. But I had this lower on my list initially because I knew that the Japan story was going to make it in here somewhere. And then rereading it in preparation for this lesson, I was like, no, it deserves to be closer to the top. And having just read Peacemaker from this same time period, from actually later in the 80s, that has really unfortunate treatment of Asian characters. I'm not super saying that Chris Claremont has the best treatment of Asian characters by a white writer, but nobody's colored orange. And nobody is speaking in pig English. So I really think that for the time, it was a very smart decision and it was very well researched. And you can tell that it was made with a love for the character and a love for the situation that they put him in. So if you've never checked out this original miniseries, it's like the first collection is 5 issues. It's not long at all. I think if you like Wolverine or even tangentially interested in him, you owe it to yourself to check it out. So that's my number 2. You already know my number 1. It's Enemy of the State. Jason, what is your number 1 best Wolverine story?
Okay, so the Chris Claremont, Frank Miller Wolverine, or it would be in my honorable mentions.
That's fair. Totally fair.
Because what you just said, like, I think it's a little too dated now. I do respect the game.
Yep.
And I do think it's very readable now. My number 1 Wolverine story is a Wolverine story that I don't think a lot of people have ever read. It is called Wolverine: Logan by Brian K. Vaughan with art by Edward Rizzo. It was published in, I believe, 2006. My favorite Wolverine stories are the Wolverine stories where he is a Ronin.
Yes.
Where he
taking off of this tradition.
Where he is by himself, kind of wandering around. And I do have a fondness for, I want Wolverine in 2 places. I want Wolverine in Canada or I want Wolverine in Japan.
From 2008, I just 2008. Checked out.
Okay. But this was a series that was written post House of M. And House of M, of course, was an alternate reality tale. And in that story, Wolverine got all of his memories back because of the thing. So this led to him going to a lot of stories that were done very well and a lot of stories that were done very bad. This is one of those that were done very well because this is Logan returning to Japan to settle an old score. And he returns to Hiroshima. This, Ashley, is the story that the Wolverine took for its opening credits.
Yep.
This is...
Which, by the way, great opening sequence in that movie.
This is a short and... Yes. He returns to Hiroshima, and he is intact by an inhuman burning man. in the present day. And this has him flashing back to World War II, where he was imprisoned by the Japanese and he met an American soldier, a very racist American soldier named Lieutenant Warren. Through that, they plot a desperate escape. Along the escape, he meets a woman called Atsuko. I may be saying that wrong. And he sort of
Atsuko? Atsuko, yeah.
And then he falls in love with her. And then during the course of the story, they look up in the sky and they see the bomb. And then their story goes from there. It is very much a story about anger and peace. And weirdly, I will tell you, Wolverine is the peace analog in this story. He's not the war.
Fun. That's a fun flipping of this. Having you talk about this, I'm like, I could have read this tonight.
Well, actually, it is. I will tell you that it is on my Comixology.
Fantastic.
I made sure that I reread it last night because I wanted to have it very fresh. The art by Eduardo Rizzo is fantastic. It's really good. It has I can tell you've seen the cover, everybody. It's the cover where there's one of those prisoner holes that you'll see like in war camps.
Yep.
And you can see that there are feet on top of the hole, and Wolverine is crouched over, and he's sort of through shadow, but you can see his eyes, his teeth, and his claws, and he's looking right at camera. And then the title just says Logan over it. It's a very soft, a very quiet, a very simple story. And that's why it feels like a Western. Which I also think...
Which also sometimes borrows from the great tradition of Ronin and samurai stories.
Yes, which I also think make for great Wolverine stories. So Wolverine Logan, if you haven't read it, that is my number one.
What a great suggestion.
Yes. But again, it doesn't get the due that it deserves. I think it is the best Wolverine story.
I wonder if
it's very simple.
I'll know this when I do the recommended reading. I wonder if it's not in print or if it had maybe a smaller print run.
Like I said, you can find it on Comixology. That's where I found it.
Well, if we can't, that's the great thing about living when we do.
Yep.
Is if we can't. So those are our lists.
It's only $6 on Comixology, everybody.
We're going. The recommended reading is obviously going to be everything on our lists,
including Ben's book,
plus Ben's Wolverine work. But the great thing is, with Comixology now, if we can't. I like to recommend physical copies for people, but if we can't get physical copies, there's always a Comixology link to be had, even if it's just a single issues, even if it's not a collection. That's like a really fabulous thing. So now that we've done our
what we should say, everybody, your recommended reading, if you want to get links to all these choices, especially Wolverine Logan, go to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading.
There you go.
Yeah, the full list of every episode we've ever done.
That's true. It's all on there. And now our discussion.
All right, everybody, we have a very special guest. He is the author of Ninth Metal, The Unfamiliar Garden, and the writer of comics such as Wolverine, the upcoming Ghost Rider. He's also a screenwriter of a film that just premiered at Sundance, Submarine, and, of course, the reason we brought him on the podcast, the upcoming event, 10 Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine. Please welcome to the podcast, returning Geekish Wrestling guest, Ben Percy. Ben, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back on.
Oh, it's so good to hear that deep,
for anyone,
silky smooth whiskey voice.
For anyone who hasn't listened before, we did tell them you would have the best voice in podcasting.
Everybody turn down or up your subwoofer right
now. Since, Ben, we're also talking about, the theme of the day, Wolverine, and you've been writing Wolverine has it been 2 years yet?
Well, I mean, you can
do we count the podcast
schedule a little bit if you count the podcasts. So I started off writing, Wolverine the Long Night, the audio drama that was 10 episodes. That was followed up by Wolverine the Lost Trail. And then in the midst of all that, I started writing X-Force, which is, a Wolverine-led series. And then that led to the mainline comic Wolverine. So it's probably been more like 4 years.
Well, that's a long Wolverine run. It's a long, hard winter, if someone would say. We want to ask you, since this is an episode about Wolverine stories, for you, what have been some Touchstone Wolverine stories that you like to reference or you always come back to when you're focusing on the character of Logan?
Sure. Well, I think I've said this before, probably on this podcast, that Wolverine is my favorite character in comics. So to be writing him is, cheesy as it sounds, a childhood dream come true. And funny enough, I jumped into Wolverine at a strange time. I was reading and collecting the mainline series when he was Patch. So I was very confused. I was like, wait, this guy is Wolverine, but he's also Patch, and he's also Logan.
So when he got rid of the eye patch, you got angry.
And he's wearing an eye patch, but he can see because he has healing factor. But why is he wearing a black singlet? And so I was really confused, but enchanted at the same time because the character just spoke to me. And from there, I started, going through bins and finding old issues. And, I was already familiar with the character from reading X-Men, but, it probably was more in high school that I began to sort of concentrate on understanding his canon. And for me, of course, the signature series are like the Claremont, Miller, and BWS, really. But also, Larry Hama and Silvestri. Those are probably my favorite classic runs. And what Jason Aaron did was really fantastic. I think he wrote probably my favorite Wolverine issue of all time, which is The Man in the Pit. Or The Man in the Hole, The Man in the Pit.
I think it's The Man in the Pit.
I'll Google it.
And yeah, those are really my touchstones when I think back on like what stories just continue to slash and hack their way through my brain.
Well, you were both correct. It is The Man in the Pit. And since, Ben, you were talking about sort of what hacks and slashes its way through your brain, I think that's an interesting turning point to say, what are essential elements in a successful Wolverine story, in your opinion? Because I think hacking and slashing through brains must be.
That, of course, is an essential part of the character, that he has these primal urges. He has this, berserker quality that takes him over sometime. And we can all relate to that, not in an aspirational way, but in a relatable way, right? That's why the tale of the werewolf or the tale of Jekyll and Hyde is one everybody can, connect to. But it's, there's a reason that people want to be vampires and and they're scared of becoming werewolves or even find werewolves somewhat distasteful. It's because, we know that we're all hairy on the inside. When we have too much to drink, when we're exhausted, when we're pushed to the brink because of rage or whatever circumstance or whatever else, right? There's a cage that rattles. There's a lock that comes undone, and something snarling, just explodes out of us. And that is an essential part of Wolverine. But he has this history of violence that I think everybody finds especially appealing because he has been used continuously as a weapon by others, right? He, whether it's with Team X as Weapon X, the mind wipes, the mind plants, have resulted in him being an instrument of mayhem that serves oftentimes shadowy government ops, and he's filled a reservoir with blood, and that haunts him. If you think of him as sort of equivalent to Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven.
You're speaking Jason's language right now, evoking Westerns.
Yeah, man. Unforgiven is one of the best Westerns, and that's very much Logan.
And that was, a really important story to me when writing Wolverine the Long Night, in that you find Logan in Alaska, sort of holed up and trying to escape humanity. If you think about Alaska as the last frontier, that's their motto. It's the edge of the map. It's the place where people go to run away from the law, from marriages, from themselves, from the government, whatever. It's where people go off the grid. So I said it there, but of course, like Clint Eastwood, he gets drawn back into the fray. And this is another signature element of Logan's character. Not only is he haunted by his past, but he's motivated to atone for it. He especially sort of feels empathy for vulnerable populations and complete distaste for the powerful and how they might, damage or take advantage of others. So he comes out swinging in defense of others, as a form of compensation for what he's done.
So let's talk about 10 Lives in X Deaths of Wolverine, your big event that's coming out. And at the time, listeners, 10 Lives has already been hitting comic book stores, and X Deaths will be hitting stores the week of this episode. So we're not going to go too deep into spoilers because we haven't read it at the time of this recording. But Ben, when you're coming up with this Wolverine event, is this something that spun out of the current X-Men continuity, or did you kind of have this story before you got on the book and you were just waiting for the right chance to tell the story? And then I want to ask with that, when you're telling this big Wolverine event, how hard is it to tell a story about Wolverine that hasn't already been told about him? Because he's basically had a solo series for 30 years now.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at the first page of my run, you can see that this event was set up there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
The first, I don't have it in front of me, but the first few lines are something like...
I actually have it on my tablet.
There you go.
Let's see how well Ben Percy can remember his own writing.
or maybe Ashley should just do her best Ben Percy impression right now.
Oh, that would be...
I'd be down for Ashley's Wolverine impression right now.
My Wolverine impression or my Ben Percy impression? Because those are...
I think they're one and the same.
I'm like, what's going to embarrass me less? Okay. I'll leave it to the listeners to decide. This is the whole first page. Somewhere in Alaska. James, Logan, Patch is mentioned. Weapon X, Wolverine. Canada, Madripoor. New York, Japan. Krakoa. Names scramble. Times get slippery. My brain feels bruised black. I don't know when, where, or even who I am. I mean...
That's true.
Ben, you're not lying. It's right here.
Excellent. I thought I was listening to myself for a second there.
Oh, thank you.
It's the idea of this fragmented life, this mosaic life, the shattered pieces of which come together. He's had so many identities. He's lived in so many different places, and as a result of that, right, if you don't know your history, you don't necessarily know who you are fully. And this event, in response to your second question, Jason, it leans into what comics do. Comics are all about this cycle, right? And oftentimes this cycle is defined by nostalgia. Okay, here comes Sabretooth again, and here comes Red Skull again, and here comes Doom again, right? And people get excited. They're like, oh yes, I'm gonna check out this run of Eternals or Cap or whatever else, because there's this feeling of familiarity. And I'm leaning into that by supplying what I guess you could call the greatest Wolverine story of all time. And when I say that, I'm actually tipping my hat to all the creators who came before me. I'm not trying to herald myself. Instead, I'm saying I'm writing a story that channels legacy. I'm writing a story that will pay direct homage to, some Hama Silvestri, some Claremont Miller, some BWS. And yes, you're going to find yourself in the Weapon X lab during this. Yes, you're going to find yourself in Japan. You're going to find yourself in the Old West. You're going to find yourself in all of these time-shredding scenarios, because Wolverine has to save the past in order to protect the future. This spans, centuries of time. And it goes into also future scenarios that you witnessed in Hawk's Pox. So we're going to be dancing through the raindrops of Wolverine's history. We're going to be telling some stories around the edges of other stories already told. And everything is at stake in this moment. Sort of like the whole Wolverine canon is at stake if he can't keep ahead of the timeline threat. So in a way, this is like my love story to the character and to everybody who has been a custodian of the character in the past.
You mentioned some ideas of even future storylines from Hawk's Pox. And I want to, I know we said no spoilers at the beginning of this, but we're going to
spoil a 2.5-year-old book.
No. I'm going to say, Ben, I'm going to ask you a question and answer however you may or however the Marvel lawyers will allow you to answer. Will we be seeing some old man Logan in this storyline?
You are going to see a delineation of story that works like so. The 10 Lives of Wolverine issues deal with a threat, a time-shredding threat that will take you throughout Wolverine's history. The X deaths of Wolverine stories have to deal with a threat from the future. And right now, it's already been revealed that this character, who you've seen on the cover, the Adam Cubert cover of X Deaths, issue number 1, this character is known as Omega Wolverine. Ooh. And there's a lot of very spoilery things surrounding him and what follows. But I'm excited about the way that these stories, which at first seem divergent, will ultimately culminate, will crescendo together.
So because you evoked House of X and Powers of X, I have to ask what it was like collaborating with Jonathan Hickman on XMen and on Wolverine.
It was great. Hickman, he reached out
Too nice,
to me.
Ben. Say something mean.
Well, I will say that Jonathan Hickman is sort of delightfully evil.
Ooh, I like that.
He reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, I think you'd really kill it on X-Force."
That is a pretty solid Jonathan Hickman impression.
I'm deceased. That's the best thing ever. I want that on my phone. That's so great. Turns out he was right, too. You're crushing it.
Yeah. Well, I just took it as, literal advice. Like, oh, he wants me to kill it on X-Force. It's the murder book.
Well, and I believe, and this is not really, spoilers for, I think you're almost 20 issues in, Professor X dies in the first issue of that book.
Yeah. I don't even know what issue just came out. I'm on issue number 31 right now.
I'm just assuming you're pushing issue 200 of Wolverine already, that you're that far ahead.
I am pretty far ahead. And the 10 Lives X Deaths event is really a synthesis of what's been happening in both series, in X-Force and in Wolverine. The threats all entwined there.
Can we get into some really quickly nitty gritty? Yeah. Can you tell me when did you actually start scripting 10 Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine? Do you remember?
Well, in my initial Bible that got me the job, I mentioned it there. So it's been a glimmer in my eye for some time. And I've talked it over with Josh Kusara. I've talked it over with Hickman. I talked it over with Jordan White. I talked it over with Mark Basso. And, it went through then the corporate thresher. And, it's been in development for years. When I started scripting exactly, I'm not positive, probably a year ago.
You mean you don't just get to call the Marvel head office and say, I have a great idea for Wolverine, and then you write it the next day? That's not how it goes.
No, not how it goes. I'm just, this is my first big event that I've done on my own. I've been part of other events, but it's never all been on me from a writing perspective. The artists obviously put in God knows how many hours, and elevate everything, all the crappy dialogue and clumsy language that I might put on the page, like Kusara and Federico, like they are just at beyond A level in this. It's the best work I know that Josh has ever done. And anyways, Hickman, he's always been just sort of like, to circle back to that question. He's always just been sort of an advisor. Like he's never like a boss. He's always just like, well, what if we did this? Or actually, he doesn't say it like that. This is what Hickman always does. He goes, here's the bad idea. But what he actually means when he says, here's the bad idea, is you should do this or you're dumb. So
interesting. I've heard that statement in a lot of different writers' rooms where people will say, well, here's the bad pitch. And what they secretly mean is, okay, we're now going to spend the rest of the day figuring out how do we do the bad pitch and make it work.
Yep. So anyways, it was a great experience in working with him, and he just, he was never doing anything except sort of acting as a gardener. Like he built Krakoa with Hawksbox, and then he's like, okay, you take these 40 acres, you take these 40 acres, you take these 40 acres to all of us, and see what you can grow. So that was fun.
Well, Ben, you have written Wolverine in a couple different mediums, according to podcast and, of course, with comics. And they're both great runs. And I want to ask you, what would you say to somebody who asked you, what is the difference between writing Logan for a podcast and writing Logan for a comic book?
Well, when I first set off to write The Long Night, I felt like Wolverine had been in the spotlight a bit too much. He was becoming a little too warm and cuddly in a way. And I'm talking about the movies as well as the comics. And what I wanted people to do is feel afraid of Wolverine again, because he's a scary dude. And I wanted him to become mysterious again. So I relegated him mostly to the shadows. If you actually account for the number of minutes that Wolverine, played by Richard Armitage, is recorded and actually appears in that series, it's pretty small. It's mostly people hunting Logan and talking about Logan. And sometimes there are misconceptions of him. He's a suspect in this murder case. And I was trying to sort of do the Jaws thing, like keep the shark under the water so that he's a dorsal fin, so that he's a shadowy surge of water as long as possible. And build up his off-stage mythology. So that was the initial intent there, which is completely different than what you can get away with in a Marvel comic, where, you'll get the editorial note immediately. Like, there's not enough, of Wolverine being awesome in this issue, or Wolverine needs to be bigger on the cover. Like that's a recent note that we got.
Oh, really? I was like, that feels like a real note to me, the way that you said that.
It literally is. So,
what if Wolverine was bigger on this cover? Sorry.
That's not a Hickman note. That's a corporate note where it's
for sure.
Adam Cubert has this incredible cover. I think it's for Wolverine 19, maybe. It came out in December. And it's kind of like this old woodcut looking thing of an island. And the island turns out to be, if you look beneath the water, this monster, and Wolverine is swimming towards it, and he's really tiny. And it took a lot of convincing for that cover to run. And it might be my favorite cover.
It's a great cover. I just pulled it up while you were talking here.
But this is the kind of notes you get from up top, like make the hero do something awesome and make him giant on the cover. So anyways, when I'm writing the comic, Wolverine has to be the best there is at what he does. And sometimes, you get the note like, okay, Wolverine gets his ass handed to him here. We're not sure about that. Why do you want to do that? Maybe we should have him do something awesome instead. And I'm like, well, I'll fight back against that kind of stuff. But there's definitely like a sort of decree that you get as to how the characters should be spotlighted that didn't apply to the podcast stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to be maybe a little bit riskier there. And I really do think of the podcast as kind of a prelude or prologue to my run in the comics.
That's awesome. Well, final question here before we talk about some of the other work here. This big event, every cover I've seen for 10 Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine has a million versions of Wolverine on the covers, excluding Patch. What is your favorite Wolverine look or costume?
I will say there is some Patch stuff that gets touched on.
Nice.
But I mean, the iconic image is, the Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X look.
Mm-hmm.
The
which
giant
makes no
visor.
sense. All those strange things dangling off of him are completely ridiculous, but it's amazing. And it captures like that synergy of savagery and tech and, somebody who has lost his mind and is being puppeted by others.
It's great. Yeah. And that cover, of course, is just iconic. It's amazing. All right, listeners. Well, we want to tell you really quick, touch on some of Ben's other work right now. If you are not reading the Comet Cycle trilogy, you're missing out. The second book, The Unfamiliar Garden, just came out. I've read the 9th Metal last year. It was fantastic, Ben. So I highly recommend it.
Shucks.
Is there anything you would like to tell our listeners about The Unfamiliar Garden, which is available right now on Amazon?
Yeah. I mean, just to give you sort of like a dueling elevator pitch, one for the Comet Cycle and one for the Unfamiliar Garden. Like when I wrote the Comet Cycle, when I pitched the Comet Cycle, one of the things I wanted to do was build my own shared universe after having been a reader of comics my whole life, after having written for comics, DC or Marvel since 2014. I wanted, my own sandbox, I guess. So the trigger for the shared universe is an age-old sci-fi concept. A comet comes streaking through the solar system. The planet spins through the debris field. And in the meteor shower that follows, new elements are introduced to the world. And these upend the laws of physics and geology and biology. And they create chaos in the geopolitical theater. And they shake up the weapons sector and the energy sector. And in a very Marvel sort of way, they create a new dawn of heroes and villains. So, every book in the Comet Cycle, and these are standalone novels, in the same way that you can like read Wonder Woman and then read Superman and then read Batman, and they're all part of the same universe, and they push up against each other, and you have a more holistic vision of the shared universe if you're reading all of them. But you can just read the individual titles. In the same way, all the books in the Comet Cycle take place at the exact same time in different parts of the world. So you can read book 2, The Unfamiliar Garden, before you read book 1. The Unfamiliar Garden takes place in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Puget Sound, the Olympics in particular, and it has to do with alien plant growth. So the story kicks off with a vanishing. There's a girl who vanishes, and she is the daughter of a couple, and their marriage is already in a rocky sort of place. Now, the husband is a mycologist. He works for the University of Washington as a professor. And he is investigating 5 years later, after they've divorced, 5 years after his daughter disappeared. He's investigating this new plant life, new fungal life that's growing. And then the wife is a detective with the Seattle PD, and she is investigating a series of ritualistic murders. And their paths converge again. They're brought together professionally before they're brought again emotionally. And there also is the possibility that springs up that their daughter might still be alive. So it's very much a family story with all these wild sci-fi shenanigans going on around the margins of it.
That's the thing that I really liked about the first book, is that it does feel like one of these, kind of like a Marvel movie, that there is this big event that happens, but the big event doesn't take the foreground. It's more about how the characters are reacting to the big event. And so it really, I thought, grounded it in a really excellent way. And by the way, listeners, if you haven't seen the covers of these books, they have like probably the best covers of any prose books I've ever seen. Like these amazing
cool
colors, these amazing shapes. They're very eye-catching, but
they'll look really good next to all of your Ben Percy comics.
there you go. And we would be remiss if we didn't also talk about, man, you're not only are you changing everything Wolverine, you're writing some fantastic novels, you're taking on Ghost Rider. You have a film that just premiered, correct?
Yeah.
Tell us about Submarine.
The Sundance Film Festival, sadly but understandably, got canceled as an in-person event, but it's happening virtually. So, yeah, the virtual premiere, Sundance premiere of Submarine will take place very soon, after this podcast is actually aired. And it is a story that I co-wrote with James Ponsel, the director. And in a way, it's revisionary. I was very excited to show my daughter all of these movies and share all these books that had influenced me as a kid. But when I sat down and read her The Hobbit, she said, this is cool, Dad, but where are all the girls? And I returned to the book and recognized my blind spots and investigated further. I figured out The Hobbit actually only has one female pronoun in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there was a similar response to Stand By Me and to The Goonies and to other stories that are considered universal, but actually, just focus on dudes. And so I wanted to write a universal coming of age story that sort of battled back against that. So Submarine is a story that takes place in the last weekend of summer. And it follows 4 girls. And in the opening minutes, they discover a dead body. And that dead body is actually pretty much the only guy in the whole film. Because I referred to it as revisionary, right? And we have moments that feel like Psycho. Like we have moments that feel like an episode of CSI. We have moments that feel like a Halloween movie. We have these moments that are sort of playing around with and reinventing the way in which women who are oftentimes, in these stories, victimized and present mostly to help a man go on a journey and discover something about themselves. We're sort of taking these moments and giving them a twist and seeing them through a new lens. And we hope that the story is, one that sweeps people away, that has universal qualities and that scares you because it's, it's a story about growing up. And if you think about how typically high school is the province of the horror film, middle school, to me anyway, was a lot scarier. Middle school is when, your safe little cocoon quickly comes unraveled and strange things are happening to people's bodies and hormones and friendships are fracturing. And, you really suddenly don't know who you are as you work your way through a maze of fluorescent lit hallways and become one more anonymous name on a roster on a series of interchangeable classrooms. So we wanted to tap into some of those anxieties and also, in a way, it feels like a pandemic movie in that kids have had to grow up really fast. And at the same time, they're kind of stuck. They're in this weird transitory phase. And that's what the movie really digs its fingers into. It's about, figuring out death. It's about figuring out how to grow up. It's about some of the harsh truths that come out as summer thematically moves into the rot of fall.
And do you know at this point if it is going to hit anywhere streaming or be available after Sundance?
Yeah, so we already sold it, and Baker
Nice.
Street
Congrats.
and Sony, are the producers on it. So it will. We don't know exactly where it will be streaming. We know it'll hit a few more film festivals throughout the spring, and then it'll have a theatrical release in the summer.
Oh, nice.
That's really cool.
Fantastic.
All right, so look forward to Instagram pictures of Ben Percy in a tux on a red carpet very soon.
Yeah, really.
That's so awesome.
Buffalo plaid tux.
Ooh, honestly, though, that would be very cool.
All right. Well, listeners, we're going to have a little bit more with Ben on our Patreon over at patreon.com/Jawiin, asking him about his writing process. But Ben, X Lives of Wolverine and the 10 Lives of Wolverine and the X Deaths of Wolverine is out in comic book shops right now. Is there anything else that you would like listeners to check out besides the awesome books and the awesome films that we just mentioned?
I always appreciate when the comics readers go over and check out my prose. That means a lot. So, yeah, if anybody picks up The Unfamiliar Garden, that would mean the world.
And then tweet at Ben and tell him that we sent you.
Yeah, please do.
There you go.
Ben, keep on writing. Thank you so much for coming back to Geek History Lesson and joining us today. It was fantastic.
Thanks to you and all those listeners out there.
Well, there you have it, folks. Straight from the mouth of the Wolverine writer himself, Ben Percy. Man, what a conversation. Thanks for joining us on the episode, Ben. And you can hear more of Ben, like we said, over at patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. I guarantee you we're going to talk to him about his Green Arrow run, because I also think that's fantastic.
Well, I mean, also, how do you not just want more of that voice in your life?
Yeah.
He missed a career in radio.
I've actually, it's funny, like, I remember when he first got the Wolverine podcast, I think I sent him a message being like, are you narrating it?
Yeah. The Wolverine podcast, by the way,
it's really good.
It's now publicly, it used to be harder to get because you could only get it on Audible. It is very good.
It's really good.
Very good.
But thanks, Ben. We're so happy to have him return, and hopefully in a couple of years we can just have you back for whatever else you're writing.
There you go.
So, there you go. Go check out all his books. And
his prose books as well. We'll throw a couple prose books up in that recommended
yes,
reading
he writes
as well.
some really good prose books. All right, so let's go into the honor roll, Ashley.
That is correct. What's that?
The honor roll, everybody, is where if you go over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, and you leave us a 5-star review, we are going to read your review. Whatever you write, you could literally give us a dissertation about the economics of Wolverine's travels. Is it affordable for him to go to Japan, or is it not? You could write that into your Apple Podcasts review, and we will read it on the air for thanking you for helping us in the Apple algorithm. So, Ashley, who joins the honor roll today?
So we have 2 people joining us today. The first is Ali Andreasen, who says, incredibly helpful and delightful. I found this podcast trying to learn more about Oracle/Barbara Gordon. I mean, you clearly have excellent taste. When I watched The Killing Joke for the first time, and I learned so much more than I ever imagined. Now my husband and I will listen to different episodes and tell each other what Jason and Ashley had to say as if they were old friends of ours. We are, Ali. We are. When we watch a new DC or Marvel project, we say, I wonder what they would say about this. If you have any basic interest in anything geeky, take a listen. You won't regret. It's so sweet. And they are also joined by On the Drift, who says, great podcast. Been listening to the show for years. Fun listen. Great hosts.
Short and sweet.
We love both options. We love a short and sweet moment. We love an emotional moment.
Well, thank you both for writing those reviews.
What's going on in the teacher's lounge today, Jason?
Well, Professor Howlett is teaching woodshop.
Which not survivalism.
And you have to use your claws.
You have to use your claws. Okay.
So if you don't
bone
have
claws or metal claws?
If you don't have claws, you can't join in.
Okay.
That's the rule.
Intern Brago is going to do really well in that class.
Intern Brago has won several trophies in that class. So Intern Cat Brago. So he's in fact, Intern Cat Brago is the only student that Professor Howlett likes. So
that's canon to XMen too. He does like cats.
There you go. There you go. All right, everybody, don't forget that you can subscribe and listen to this podcast everywhere you find podcasts: Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud. And if you really enjoyed this episode and you know somebody out there that loves Wolverine or is very excited for X Lives of Wolverine, tell them about this episode. That is the best way that we get this podcast into new listeners. And we love new listeners. Ashley, where can they follow us on social media? You can find us at geekhistorylesson.com. That is the official website. Geekhistorylesson.com/blog is where we started a blog this year. People really, really liked our Is Andrew Garfield the Best Spider-Man essay. Cool. So more of that type of stuff coming your way this year. Also find us at facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, on Twitter at GHL Podcast, and on our brand spanking new Instagram at Geek History Lesson. By the way, follow us there. We need help. I am so proud. There was a meme on there recently about convincing people to watch The Expanse, and I'm so proud of that meme. Every time somebody says,
you can't hurt me, I was watching it before you, or you did hurt me by recommending it to me, I take that as a badge of pride.
All right, cool. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jawiin. That's Jawiin. Guy's Super Best Friend is coming February 1st. I'd really appreciate your support on it. Go over there. Even sharing it would be awesome. Superbestfriendcomic.com. Ashley is at Ashley V. Robinson on Instagram and Twitter. And she's got a Kickstarter coming soon, too. So you want to make sure you follow her over there as well. And that's it. Except for hashtag stick around, where we make sure we give you a little bit extra nugget of Wolverine information if you stuck through our plugs. Ashley.
Jason.
What's our hashtag stick around?
So first answer, best answer.
Oh, boy.
Favorite Wolverine cartoon.
Well, then that automatically includes every X-Men cartoon.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's rough. I don't know. What's your answer?
To me, it's the Wolverine that we get in Wolverine and the X-Men.
Ah, I see.
Even though X-Men Evolution is my preferred X-Men cartoon,
yeah,
I think that version of him gives me more of what I'm looking for for the character.
That's what I was going to say, too.
I mean, if it's easier for you, do you have like a favorite Wolverine moment from one of the movies that really stands out to you?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
No.
Like, I love the moment in X2 where the mansion is being raided and he jumps off of the second floor staircase onto all of Brian Cox's soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
I love that a lot.
No, not off the top of my head.
Well,
no.
there you go. Excellent stick around.
Yay! I mean, Wolverine and the X-Men is pretty good. I wish it had continued.
Nightcrawler's really good in that, too.
Is he? He doesn't show up for quite a while.
Yeah, but we watched the episode last year where they rescue him off the boat and Kitty Pryde is there. It's good.
Oh, that's
all my
right.
Claremont faves and all my Len Wein faves really show out in that cartoon.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. They love the uncanny cast for sure.
Interesting. I'm going to give Nightcrawler a call.
Okay.
I hope he picks up on the next one.
Hello?
Hi, Kurt.
Who is this?
This is Jason Inman, host of Geek History Lesson. Are you Kurt Wagner, the Incredible Nightcrawler?
Yeah, but usually only Tex calls me on this line.
Oh. How did I get on Texas line?
I don't know.
Anyways, that doesn't matter because I want to talk to you about something completely that's not text.
Sure, what's up?
What's your favorite X-Men cartoon? What's your favorite adaptation of yourself?
Oh, that is so easy. It is obviously the ones that I am the lead of, which is X-Men Evolution.
You're the lead of... You're not the lead of X-Men Evolution. It's like Rogue, dude.
Yeah, I get more solo episodes than any other character.
I expected you to say Alan Cumming, actually.
You did not specify live action.
Well, can I say live action?
There's only one option because there's only one live action Nightcrawler, which is Alan Cumming.
Well, there's
only one live action Nightcrawler. There's only one live action Nightcrawler.
Kurt, what's your favorite Alan Cumming musical?
Oh, when he was in the revival cast of Cabaret and won a Tony Award.
Oh, Kurt, do you sing Cabaret? Can I hear it?
Absolutely not.
Oh, let me hear it. Just a taste. Just a taste,
If
Kurt.
you can name any song from Cabaret, I will sing it.
Isn't it Cabaret?
Absolutely
Isn't it the opening
not.
song?
No.
Bienvenue?
No, the opening song is called Willkommen, in fact.
Oh, Willkommen.
No,
I know that
you
one.
did not know it. I will not sing for you. I do not sing for free on the internet.
I just want to hear like a couple of bars. How about Mein Herr?
Why are you Googling? You do not know Mein Herr.
I do, Mein Herr.
Sing it.
I also know Two Ladies.
Oh, Two Ladies! That song is so funny.
Can we hear a little bit of Alan Cumming?
Two Ladies?
Can we hear a little bit as Kurt Wagner doing an Alan Cumming impression doing Two Ladies?
Diddly-dee-dee, two ladies, diddly-dee-dee-dee, two ladies, diddly-dee-dee-dee, and I'm the only man. Yeah!
Well, folks.
Actual lyrics from Two Ladies.
Who's this? I'm talking to Kurt.
Oh, I don't know. I just hung up for a second. Now I am back.
All right. See you later, Kurt.
Bye. Auf Wiedersehen. Click.
I already clicked up on you.
You gotta say click.
I did. That's the click.
You gotta say click.
Who would have thought that our Wolverine episode would have ended with a...
Two ladies?
Kurt Wagner singing Cabaret.
Oh.
What a Wolverine episode.
Indeed.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jason, Too Many Songs in them.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson, and Professor Jason, would you please dismiss the class?
I'm the best at what I do, and what I do is ending podcasts.